first of all, before we start our conversation, let's make sure we are actually going live on OurNet. And I believe we are. That's fantastic. Excellent news. I'm looking at the OurNet page.
Excellent.
We are going live. So it's lovely to speak to you. I promoted you by saying that you'd recovered from a brain tumor and a near-death experience to boot. And those were just two of your many drivers, because I know you've got many other sort of inspirations and what moves you forward to share the whole idea of holistic health with the world. I mean, maybe we should start with if you don't mind, we're talking about what happened to you and the impact that had on your life and what it is you do now.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So I started out life, went to university, studied economics and law, went into corporate world, went into merchant banking, sort of pretty standard way out of that whole process. And very quickly, after about 3 years, I decided this wasn't for me, and I bought my first business. So I started doing that. And then I was going along running my businesses, life as usual, moved countries from South Africa to the UK. Things were just sort of going along. And then I started having these chronic migraines, and eventually they decided to do an MRI scan and found that there was a brain tumor. So that was all fine, and we had all that found out. They did operation straight away because it was hydrocephalus, so they did that, and they sort of said, okay, carry on with life as usual. So that's what I did. And about 18 months later, after a scan, they found that the tumor had started to grow. And at that point, because it was quite a sort of rapid growth in a short space of time, the oncologist came on board, and there was this discussion about what do we do, where do we go through from here? And the oncologist wanted to biopsy, operate, things like that, see if it was malignant. And the neurosurgeon that I was seeing at the time, he wasn't convinced about that. So we had this sort of, I wouldn't say standoff, but there were these two different opinions. So at that point, I said, okay, you give me 3 months, let me go off, see what I can do. And if it's still growing in 3 months' time, then I'm the oncologist's person. If not, then we can have another conversation. So I went off, and at that point, I did a therapy called Body Talk for 3 months. And got to the end of 3 months, they did the MRI scan, the tumor stopped growing, so that was great, tick that box, and that was great. But what I got, and we were chatting about this the other day, what I got in that 3 months, so I'm aware that tumors can grow and they can stop growing, and I really need to say that, because some people will jump in and say, yeah, but maybe that's just what the tumor did, maybe it had nothing to do with it, but the tumor could have stopped on its own. But what I got in those 3 months was I got my sense of self back again, and I hadn't realized how far I'd got from myself and how lost I'd become in life with the move, with young children, with work, with businesses, things like that. I'd really sort of almost moved away from myself, and I was living this sort of in this world that just didn't really relate to me. So I got that sense of self, that clarity, sense of purpose, centering. I don't know, you can call it anything you want. I got that, and that actually really appealed to me, because I thought to myself, if I could actually help people, well, actually at that point, I wasn't thinking about helping anyone. I went then and I did a one-day course to help my family with Body Talk, and ended up signing up to become a practitioner at the end of that. And that sort of was the beginning of me going into holistic therapy. So then I trained and did all the courses I could do over the next 8 years or so. And then as a natural progression, ended up buying the center that I was working in. And so that's the holistic center. So that's sort of how I got into holistic therapies. And, but it was, and I think most people do through their journey. So that was my experience with getting to that point.
Well, that's quite amazing. Maybe we'll move on to the near-death experience in just a moment. But what's really interesting about what you say there is the event of or the condition that you were in. But what seems to be pivotal is that how that changed an attitude in yourself or helped you rediscover yourself. So it's not just about the condition, is it? It's not just about the impact of this terrible sort of traumatic situation, but what that awoke in you, I suppose, it would be another part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely sort of makes you look at things differently. And I just found having that sort of more centered, coming back to myself, because life comes along and you get so caught up in it. And before you know it, you're almost sort of not living from yourself anymore. And it was sort of realigning that, resetting that, and bringing me back to self. is the best way that I can explain it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that as well. And it's a choice in a way, isn't it? Because I suppose you could have just taken, like throw everything at me route and wanted to. I mean, it's not unlike the situation in the world at the moment, is it? In terms of this sudden change, and then what we do with that. And a lot of people in the world at the moment want to get back to normal, and then others are thinking, hold on a minute, normal wasn't that brilliant in some ways. Maybe we can do something different as we move forward now. And I have heard, I mean, bringing this all together now, I did hear someone saying that, the coronavirus, the COVID event, it could either be like a near-death experience where we really change, or it's just a bit of a hangover kind of experience where we think, oh, that wasn't very good, but let's get back to normal as quick as we can. Or is it something more profound than that? Can you tell us about your near-death experience and, how that impacted you as well?
Yeah, so I, as I was saying to you earlier, when I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, it was probably about 14, 15 years ago. And I had the initial operation then, and things were fine. And I carried on as normal till about 6 years ago, where I suddenly had pressure in my head again. And so I went back to the neurosurgeon, and they scanned, and they found that a cyst had formed on the tumor. So they went and operated, and because of where the tumor is in the brain, it's quite difficult to get to. It's right in the middle. And so they sort of did what they needed to do. And then 8 weeks later, the cyst had filled up again. So they had to repeat the operation 8 weeks later. So I went through the whole thing again. And the experience from the one to the other was completely different. The first one, I came out and did what I normally do, went back to life as normal and things like that. And then the second one, I ended up in ICU, and I just had that first night in ICU, I just had, which I wasn't aware at the time what it was. It was just the most bizarre experience where I had a whole night where I was watching the clock, and the clock was to the right of my bed. And I would look at the clock, and the second hand would say, for argument's sake, be at the 12. And then I would close my eyes, and what it felt like was a huge range of events would happen. And the way that I worded it in a text to a friend who was doing distance sessions on me at the time, I said, I felt like I had a whole range of almost many, many pages or many, many books of experiences that were possible, but this was the one that I was living. But it's almost like all possibilities existed in that time, and I could see them all. But this was the one that I was living in this moment. And then I would open my eyes, and the second hand wouldn't have moved at all. It's almost no time had passed, but I'd experienced all these experiences. So things like that were happening. And I was aware of my husband, I was aware of my children, I was aware of my love for them, but I wasn't fearful. There was absolutely no fear. I wasn't fearful that I wasn't going to be there. I was aware of just the sense of complete and utter unconditional love. And it sounds weird, but it sounded, whatever happened was okay. If I didn't come back, that was okay. If I did leave and go somewhere else, that was okay. There was no attachment to needing to make things go one way or the other. So I came through this whole night of many, many experiences, which it felt like a really, really long night. But as I said, no time had passed. And then the next day when I spoke to the nurses, I sort of said to them, have you moved beds? Last night the clock was over there. Now it's directly in front of me. How is that possible? And they said, no, you've been in this bed the whole time. And all I can think of is that I was obviously out of my body at that time when all those experiences were happening.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. And obviously that's informed your life from there on in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's almost like that's enough. What you said there is just, to me, is so powerful as an insight about life and how we look at life. When we are running along on our normal sort of tracks and habits, and then something like that can happen, and how profound that is. But you obviously, life goes on, and you are using this experience, all those two experiences, and your life thus far, and you used the phrase before, helping people. Now that's what you are doing now, isn't it? You want to share messages about holistic health, about health with people. That's the next part of the project.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I work with now, my intention is to raise the level of holistic to more mainstream, so more people have access to it and can benefit from it. And with that, I also put in is where I'm trying to let more people know about holistic health and holistic therapies. And it's to give information without any expectation or judgment. So as long as they have the information, they might look at it and go, this is not for me, and that's fine. But at least they've got the information to make an informed decision. And that's where I'm coming from, is if we can let more people know about what's out there and what's available, then they can make better decisions, more informed decisions.
That's so wonderful, and I really do like your positioning of it. Is, you know, you're not evangelical, because you could be, couldn't you? You've come from such a profound position there that you could be so forceful and like, come on, world, you know, you got to see what's happening here. And I would totally understand that, but clearly you're not like that. Do you see a kind of a parallel with what's going on in the world at the moment with the coronavirus and with COVID as the world's wake up call or whatever, and how we might look at life differently?
Well, I mean, I think like a lot of people do, this feels like such a big reset, and reset from so many different perspectives. I mean, even just in the area where I live, you know, you can't people, I mean, we've got chickens and we've had chickens for many years, but you can't get chickens because everyone's suddenly wanting chickens because they're wanting eggs. So because eggs are in high demand. And so it's almost just reminding people where everything comes from, because up until now you just went to the shops and bought some eggs, whereas now everyone's looking for chickens in their garden. So it's almost sort of reminding people what's important, where they come from, where everything comes from. So it's an interesting time. And also there's a lot of fear coming up for people. So and that was something that I've thought about. So with the near-death experience, what was very clear for me when I came out of it is I went into a place and I experienced a space of absolutely no fear. And it's not to say I don't experience fear in my life now, but I can take myself back to that place of no fear. It's almost like giving me a reference from no fear to absolute fear. You have the spectrum now. And what it feels like now is there's just a huge amount of fear, and the reset is around us sort of prioritizing what's important in our life and letting go of those things that aren't important. So.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Yeah, thank you for that. Well, how are people going to stay in touch with your onward journey? And I love it because it's like a weather report, or you know, the sort of security status is we're moving holistic from below the radar to on mainstream. How are people going to stay in touch with you doing that? What's the best way to do that?
Well, as you know, what we've been talking about is I'm quite keen to do similar to what you're doing now, do talks with people and start having conversations with people who have interesting views that expand people's view of the world and what's out there. And with the various sort of things that I've done through the Holistic Center, through Wellness Day, things like that, there's so many interesting people with fascinating points of view, which really expand your belief in what's possible. And I think for me, that really excites me and interests me, is because there is so much possibility out there. And if we can just get talking about that and get people looking at that, you then do expand people's view of what's out there in the world.
Fantastic. Okay, so Stacey McIntyre, as you see it on the screen there, she's on Facebook, and Wellness Day is a way of finding out, and holistic health. She's already like many fingers in the big holistic pie here. But I think it's going to be a new brand around this whole endeavor of talking to people and spreading the word. Stacey, thank you so much for talking with me today, and good luck with it. And we'll connect people up who want to find you, who come back to us as well.
Excellent, Carl. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Lovely chatting.
Bye for now.